The senior Libyan military commander is killed, but mystery surrounds his death. Who could have been behind the killing of Abdel Fattah Younes? And what will this mean for the rebels' campaign to remove Muammar Gaddafi from power? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. A major blow may have been dealt to the Libyan National Transitional Council with the killing of its senior military commander, Abdel Fattah Younes. And right after the incident, the head of the opposition, Mustafa Abdel Jalil, said Younes was killed on his way to a military council hearing along with two of his men.
We are really sorry and we feel sad to declare the death of General Abdel Fattah Younes, the Chief of Staff of the Libyan Army, together with Colonel Mohammed Khamis and Colonel Nasser Mahroum. We had some news regarding that they are following Abdel Fattah Younes and his two companions, and they were attacked by the Gaddafi people and Gaddafi army.
Well, we'll get into the implications of all this in just a moment, but to know more on the man at the centre of this story, Khadija Makari reports.
He was entrusted by Muammar Gaddafi with putting down the Libyan uprising, but he joined it instead. Abdel Fattah Younes' switch of allegiances is said to have so enraged the government of Tripoli that a $4 million bounty was put on his head. When he first defected to Benghazi in February, he was welcomed in a blaze of publicity. He was swiftly appointed commander-in-chief of the opposition forces. Younes threw himself into the position with enthusiasm, touring the front line to boost morale among the rebel forces. But after what some say were concerns about his relationships with Tripoli, he was replaced and became chief of staff instead. Now sources say it emerged Younes may have been in contact with the other side all along. Younes was one of Muammar Gaddafi's most trusted generals. The two men share a history stretching back 4 decades. He, like Gaddafi, was a member of the officer corps that overthrew King Idris in 1969. Until February, he held the sensitive post of Interior Minister. Some even considered him the number 2 in the Libyan government. It was this impression of a retained closeness with Tripoli that he ultimately could not shake. Khadija Magadi, Al Jazeera.
Well, joining us now are our 3 guests in London: Ashur Shamis, a Libyan journalist and writer; in Geneva, Alexander Vutravas, a professor of international relations at Webster University, and he's also the editor of the Swiss Military Review. And in Beirut, we have Rami Khouri, director of the Issam Faris Institute at the American University of Beirut. Good to have you all with us. Alexander Vutravas, if I could start with you. Now, a lot of mystery surrounding the death of Younes, but based on what we know, and admittedly it isn't much at the moment, but if you were to point the finger of suspicion somewhere here, where would you begin as far as who was behind his death?
Well, this is very much a conspiracy theory, but I will just ask who is winning out of who is winning out of this situation, and I would say that rather the opposition and rebel government, the Transitional Council, is rather the winner of this particular event. It is certainly a way for them to shed a certain number of ties, sometimes embarrassing ties with the regime. And number 2, the real question is what has this particular chief of staff of the rebel forces brought to the rebellion? I'm sure that if we look back at 5 months of this military career, we will see that there is not so many results that can be brought in favor of this particular personality.
Interesting that you say that this benefits the rebels. I mean, some would disagree with that. I mean, do you not see that this may show up divisions among the oppositions?
Well, I would say on the contrary, it solves many divisions, many internal divisions within the Transitional Council. It also brings forward perhaps less of a military image and a coup d'etat image of this rebellion and more of a political side of things to the international community. So on the whole, I think that this is probably, in the long run, a rather satisfactory and winning proposition for the opposition rebels.
Ashur Shamis in London, as a Libyan journalist, what do you believe is the story behind this?
Well, I completely disagree with the analysis we've just heard. I think what happened, I do go along with the Council's explanation of what happened. There is no benefit for the Council or for the opposition or for the Libyan fighters of Younes's death. You know, the fact that he was killed with 2 of his aides or whatever, this goes even more to tell me that those who killed him are an assassination squad, a sleeping cell working for Gaddafi, because killing him at this time in the history of the resistance is very negative to the Council and very beneficial to Gaddafi indeed. The only thing, of course, if there is tribal connotations for this killing, then that is something else, and could be something very, very serious. But for the killing itself, I think it's Gaddafi is doing right away.
Well, there's no doubt that his decision to switch sides in this conflict and throw his lot in with the rebels had major implications for what happened later, of course. But there are many people among the rebels, among the opposition movement, who remain suspicious of him because of his years of long association with Gaddafi. So that points to the theory, doesn't it, that there may have been people within the opposition movement that may have had a hand in this?
Then everybody then comes under suspicion from the members of the Council. Abdul Jalil, Mahmoud Jibril, so many people worked with the Gaddafi or with Saif Gaddafi until the very last days. So you can't really put that criteria and just apply it to one person, not to the others. And then, all right, the general was controversial. Some people didn't like him, or some people were not happy with his existence. But he took a stand, and a consistent stand from the very first day, and he defended the opposition, and his performance has been, very, very admirable indeed.
Rami Khouri, what's your take on this? Do you think that this will end up doing more harm than good, perhaps, in the short term?
Well, I think it's a very accurate reflection of exactly what kind of complicated, murky life in the shadows world we're dealing with here. If there were a hierarchy of unknowns and obscurity in Middle Eastern politics, defectors from the Gaddafi regime to the rebels who were assassinated and nobody knows who did it, is probably the zenith of the high watermark of this process. I mean, this is just extraordinarily representative of the reality, the ugly reality of politics and power in the Middle East. There are several candidates for who did it, several arguments for who benefits. We just don't know any of the details, and this is how power and politics are exercised in the old Middle East. And Libya is in a transition between the old and the new, and this is what happens in war. We're in the midst of an active war, so this should be tragic as it is for the death and the families of the dead and all the others who have died in Libya. This is the reality that we're dealing with as we transition from 40, 50 years of police state rule, not just in Libya, but across most of the Arab world, into something new. And these transitions are never easy, and here's a good example of that.
Alexander Vutis, regardless of who may have been behind this killing, whether it was forces loyal to Gaddafi and this was some sort of punishment for his switching sides, or whether it was anyone else for that matter, what implications is this likely to have for the international efforts with the Libyan opposition against Gaddafi? Will it shake international support for the Transitional Council?
Well, first of all, if you just let me add one point to what was just said a few minutes ago. Yes, this is war up to a certain point, but this particular event is not about war, it's about politics, and it's about a revolution, it's about a rebellion, and eventually it's a transitional process. Now, to answer your question, I think that it certainly brings a lot of awareness, and it certainly brings more political light to the Transitional Council than it probably had in the past few weeks and past few months. So certainly there is a need after 4 or 5 months of military involvement of the international community to eventually have a landmark and see some kind of progress, some kind of evolution, or some rejuvenate the awareness in this event. I will just remind you that the context is not very bright for international intervention. If we think right now of internal politics in the United States, if we think of what is going on either in the United States or in France with regards to the parliaments needing to sanction the continuation of the war effort. And this is not looking very good, and the deadline for all of these countries is the month of August. So to have this kind of a crisis or this kind of a situation is rather, as I said before, in favor of involvement, implications, and transition in Libya.
Ashur Shamis, are you concerned that this might shake the confidence of countries like the United States, Britain, and several dozen other countries now that have recognized the rebel council in Libya as the country's legitimate leaders?
No, if we have a good explanation of what happened, if the council comes up with a good explanation of what happened, I don't think we'll have repercussions there. It has
well, their explanation so far seems to have turned up more questions than answers.
Yes, well, that's what I'm saying. You know, they need to come up with a plausible explanation that people can understand. But it does reflect on the security situation in Benghazi. It's very, very lacking. It's very lax. It's no good for them. But it does not. It would not affect the overall march of the revolution, especially in the West. You know, in the West, I think the council is almost irrelevant. Has no influence at all. There are efforts of the people in the West who are going on and pushing ahead with the task of gaining more land and bringing about the end of Gaddafi. So I don't think it will have repercussions as far as the West is concerned or as far as the international situation is concerned. I mean, look at the international situation now. There's more and more recognition of the Council, more and more recognition of the situation in Libya, and more conviction that Gaddafi's future is limited in Libya.
And you believe that will continue regardless of this killing, that won't affect the confidence of other nations in backing the National Transitional Council as the legitimate leaders in Libya?
No, I don't think they will take their backing off of the council. I think there will be more backing and there will be more sympathy with the council, and of course there will be the support that's given to the people in the West will continue in Western Libya, will continue from all sides.
Rami Khouri, do you believe that this might perhaps signal a troubling split within the rebel movement at a time when their forces so far have failed to make large gains on the battlefield at this point?
Well, I don't think you should use battlefield gains as a criterion for major change politically in what's going on. I think this is a slow process. Everybody knew that it would be a slow process once it turned into a military conflict, both locally and with international intervention. I think this is a wake-up call. And whoever did this, and whatever it may reflect about real or possible splits or conspiracies or whatever within the Transitional Council, the opposition groups, it's a wake-up call for them. But I think what the previous speaker just said is that the trend is very clear. Muammar Gaddafi is more or less an international outlaw. His regime is finished. This kind of Arab state security regime is finished, even though the Western countries loved it for many years. They went along with it very happily, making money, selling arms, getting oil, doing all kinds of things, until he started doing bombings of people and accused of bombings. And so, you know, the hypocrisy among the Western world is an element that we have to factor into this. It's not just the erratic behavior of local people in the Arab world, but also Western hypocrisy and double standards. But the trend is very clear. Most of the world is shifting to recognize the rebels, as they're called, and it's just a question of time. I would say 2, 3, 4 months at the most. And the point is, how quickly can the rebels organize more efficiently at the armed forces level as well as at the political and diplomatic level, and probably with more squeezing the economy, if possible, and the supply routes until Gaddafi realizes that he has to make a deal. And I think that day is coming up very soon.
Alexander Vuchavez in Geneva, you see it that way? This is basically the long-term trend here is an inexorable decline for Gaddafi's government, and that this is basically perhaps just a temporary blip.
Well, a wake-up call certainly it is, and I think we've mentioned it several times. It is a piece in the transition towards a new government, a new regime in Libya, most certainly. I would just like to come back to the personality of General Abdel Fattah Younes. In particular, he has not been able to federate all of the different currents of the rebellion. This has been much criticized in the past, and certainly there is now a door open for more collaboration within the different, or among the different entities and rebel groups fighting against Gaddafi. There is also, I think, with regards to the international community, a better presentation, a better image of the Transitional Council. And finally, I think this is becoming more of a political outcome, more and more of a political situation than it is a military one.
So you see it as others have said, that this doesn't have great military implications on the battlefield, that this won't affect the structure of the armed forces a great deal?
If any influence it may have, it will probably be a positive one in the direction of better collaboration and coordination among the rebel forces.
All right, Ashur Shamus in London, if I could turn back to you on this. How do you see this playing out in the long term? Do you still see the momentum going against Gaddafi here?
I agree wholeheartedly with my Swiss colleague, and I think he's hit the nail on the head. That this is not a revolution of personalities or leaders. Personalities, leaders come and go. There has never been a leader or a personality that outshines all the other personalities. So I think he will be missed. He will leave a gap, but it will soon be filled in. And as our friend said, there will be more people to come and save the situation. And I think Younes will be an event that has happened. He's been controversial. He did create, as I said, animosity, not animosities, but differences within the military, and the tensions between the military and the civilians and so on. Perhaps now this will disappear, and we'll have a more coherent leadership going. That's for the East. But of course, for the West, there is very, very little effect of this on the people themselves who are fighting, who are squeezing Gaddafi more and more, so that his end will be brought about sooner.
Alexander Vuchavez, I don't think it's in much dispute at the moment that the situation in Libya is pretty much at a stalemate. It has been for some time now. But does Gaddafi perhaps have any aces up his sleeve here that could really tilt the balance again in his favor?
Well, all of the assets that he could really deploy, comparative advantages, if you will, in military terms, were really his Air Force and his armored units. Much of his Air Force, as you know, has either been destroyed on the ground or has simply refused to function, to operate with the start of the international bombing campaign. With regards to the armored or mechanized troops and heavy weapons, well, today we see very little movement on the ground. We see skirmishes, but no tactical organization on the ground on either side for that matter. So I don't expect any major offensive or changes on the ground. We will continue to see skirmishes, artillery duels on both sides. Of course, we will continue to see people dying, unfortunately, and the situation is what you've described it. It is essentially, militarily, it is a deadlock.
So you think perhaps then the only strategy he has left is to basically frustrate and delay the rebels as much as possible? And if that's the case, would he be looking perhaps for some sort of political settlement here?
Definitely, because of course it is very difficult for the international community to exert pressure on Gaddafi, while most of the members, representatives of this international community are under very much the same kinds of pressures themselves. So it is very much a question of time. The month of Ramadan is also starting at this time, and so the NATO bombing will most probably be reduced. There has been a relatively intensive campaign these past few days and past few weeks, but most probably we will see less intervention, less military bombings these coming few days, and we will most probably see more of an effort to find diplomatic solutions and an exit strategy for Gaddafi.
Yeah, you mentioned the effect of Ramadan on this, and I want to turn back to Ashur Shamis on this. What implications do you think the onset of the holy month will have on this as far as the momentum on the battlefield?
Well, I think it does slow things down a little bit, but especially with the hot weather as well. But I don't think it's going to stop anything. I think the effort will go on, especially in Tripoli. You know, the big surprise is in Tripoli now. And in Tripoli, Gaddafi's forces are losing a grip. They are losing in the outsides of his people. He's having people, you know, refusing orders, abandoning positions, defecting to the opposition, and so on and so forth. And he is losing ground there. So the people in Tripoli, I don't think will be deterred by Ramadan. They will carry on as usual. But of course, you know, it will slow down, as I said.
Rami Khouri, do the international, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you believe that this will drag on for at least another 2 or 3 months. Do the international forces have the patience to continue that support?
I don't think they have any choice. I think the decision was made to intervene, and people knew that this was going to be a drawn-out process. There wasn't a clear exit strategy drawn up then. You know, these kinds of rebellions take a long time. The Americans know from their own rebellion when they were rebels fighting the British. It took them 4 or 5 years to get their independence. So people understand that this is a drawn-out process. The nature of the Western or international support, because it also has some from the Arab countries, the nature of the intervention is a bit of an, arms off, hands off, or at an arm's distance. So they don't have troops on the ground, at least not that we know of. So they can continue bombing from the air and providing supplies and pushing the diplomatic and the economic and the other symbolic actions that people have to use to tighten the noose around Gaddafi. But remember, this is a game, not a game, but this is a contest that is being played for very high stakes. Tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars will be at stake here for whoever takes control of Libya. There are tensions within Libya that have to be resolved. International forces, of course, will be right there the next day selling more airplanes and tanks to replace the ones that they bombed themselves. So there's just enormous stakes here, and people will do desperate things. I wouldn't be surprised if this killing was done by the Gaddafi people. hopeful that they will do more of this kind of activity, and there may be some infighting among the rebels here and there possibly. This is normal for this kind of transition, so I think we should expect more of this kind of action. But at some point you get a national, truly national movement that really wants to put the ugly past of the Arab world in the past and to get onto a new future of more democratic, more stable, more humane government. People will be, I think, inspired by the month of Ramadan for all that it represents in terms of Islamic ethics, justice, tolerance, mercy, and all of the good things. So that's something I think people will look forward to.
We're going to have to leave it there. Fascinating discussion, gentlemen. Will be interesting to see how all of this does play out in the next few weeks and months. I want to thank all three of you for taking part. Ashur Shamis in London, Alexander Vutravas in Geneva, and Rami Khouri in Beirut. Many thanks for your time. And thanks for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments. You can email them to us anytime at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.